Urgent 26th, 1983. Deep inside a Soviet nuclear command center, a blaring alarm shatters the silence just after midnight. The screens flash a single message. Launch detected. An American nuclear missile is reportedly heading straight for Soviet territory. The warning system showed 5 incoming missiles. Protocol demanded an immediate, massive retaliatory launch. But Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov ignored his orders. He reasoned a genuine first strike would involve hundreds of missiles, not just 5. He ignored the system and reported a false alarm. It was later discovered that the satellite radar had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds for the thermal signature of missile engines. The computer had hallucinated a war. By identifying a limitation in the automated system, Petrov prevented a global nuclear exchange. He was the only component in the command center capable of questioning the data feeding the screens. This capacity to step outside a rigid system, rationally observe its flaws, and override its pre-programmed response is metacognitive intelligence. It is the specific ability to recognize when the rules of a system are driving you toward a catastrophic error. Petrov's challenge was identifying the flaws in a silicon military system. We face the same challenge within the biological system of the human brain. Every choice you make is governed by a complex architecture of invisible rules and protocols, many of which you did not choose. We experience system blindness when we mistake these automated biological loops for conscious decisions. Whether it's the sudden urge to scroll through social media or an instinctive defensive reaction to a mistake, these are often just the brain's pre-programmed scripts running on autopilot. The most significant constraint on human potential is this state of being driven by internal systems we cannot see. If you cannot identify the loop, you cannot override the protocol. Neuroscience suggests that our experience of reality is generated entirely inside a closed-box simulator. The brain never touches the outside world directly, it only interprets the electrical signals it receives. This internal model acts much like a generative AI, predicting the next moment before it happens. It uses sensory data from your eyes and ears just to check for errors, filling in any gaps with its own assumptions to maintain a smooth experience. When the brain's prediction clashes with the actual data, it creates an error gap. In the hollow mask illusion, the brain sees a face that should be curving inward, but expecting faces to protrude, it overrides the sensory data. You see a protruding face because the brain's model won the argument against reality. Calculating every moment from scratch is too energy-intensive. To save calories, the brain compresses these predictions into repeating loops. These automated structures become your habits, your recurring anxieties, and your instinctive biases. Human perception is a survival tool designed for efficiency, not a clear window into objective truth. It will readily distort what you see and feel if it preserves the stability of the internal model. The brain organizes these thousands of subloops under a single master operating system, identity. This central model regulates which thoughts and behaviors are allowed to run and which are filtered. Identity functions as a rigid gatekeeper. Accepting information that contradicts your core sense of self requires the brain to rewrite its entire predictive architecture, which consumes massive amounts of energy. To prevent this system collapse, the brain simply filters the facts to fit the ego. A study at a law school demonstrated this by asking participants to solve a complex math problem involving statistics. When the numbers described the effectiveness of a new skin cream, participants with high math skills solved it easily. Then, the researchers used the exact same numbers, but changed the topic to gun control. This chart reveals a staggering drop in accuracy. The same people who were math experts moments ago began failing the logic when the data threatened their political identity. Their math skills didn't help. Instead, their intelligence was redirected to defend their existing beliefs. Without metacognition, a high IQ simply acts as a faster processor for a corrupted operating system. You become more efficient at justifying your errors rather than correcting them. Raw intelligence is useless if your identity system is designed to reject the truth. You end up as an expert at navigating a flawed loop. Evolutionary history defines intelligence as the ability to adapt. When life faced an atmosphere filled with toxic oxygen 2.4 billion years ago, the organisms that thrived were those that evolved to use that toxin as an energy source. Reality does not reward static knowledge. It only rewards the ability to break out of rigid identity traps when the environment shifts. True Level 1 intelligence is the capacity to adapt your internal system to meet external demands. Developing this flexibility requires a shift in how we process beliefs, moving towards Bayesian thinking. Bayesian thinking is a method where you treat your beliefs as testable probabilities rather than absolute truths. Elon Musk applies this engineering mindset to personal risk, viewing his assumptions as hypotheses that must be updated as new data arrives. This process also requires a structural change to your environment. Because identity is reinforced by social cues, institutions like the Indian Institute of Technology work by physically and digitally immersing people in an ecosystem that normalizes high-performance protocols. You must choose environments that force your system to update. Motivation is a temporary feeling, but a system is a permanent structure. Updating your identity requires changing the probabilities you act on and the environments that reinforce those actions. The final mechanism for updating the system relies on self-perception theory. This theory suggests that the brain does not look inward to discover who you are. It observes your outward actions to infer your identity. When you perform an action repeatedly, your brain observes the pattern and updates its internal model to match. If you consistently study, the brain concludes you're a learner. If you consistently exercise, it concludes you're health conscious. Action writes the code that the identity OS follows. You can accelerate this update using an identity journal. This chart shows the 3 stages: defining the target identity, documenting daily behavioral evidence that matches it, and analyzing the gap between your goal and your current actions. This creates a manual feedback loop that forces the brain to rewire its predictive model. Refusing to manually update your internal code keeps you locked in static loops of behavior. Ancient traditions, like those represented by the Golden Buddha, have long warned that this rigid attachment to a fixed identity is the primary source of human suffering and stagnation. In a universe defined by constant change, the most intelligent person is not the one who knows the most, but the one who can step outside their own system and update their identity the fastest.